Oh, how's it going, everybody? And we're back for another edition of All In, where I'll pick a rock artist, I'll listen to the entire discography, and give my thoughts on it. And the rules go kind of like this. The band in question must have 5 or more studio albums. Cover albums can count. Generally, I don't talk about live or acoustic albums unless the tracks are original in that form. So, here we go. So, this week, we're going to do a legend. That's right. So, this week, we feature Ronnie James Dio. And I decided to do this kind of like I did with Ozzy. We're going to break this off into like 2 parts, like 2 different videos. So, Ronnie James Dio, he was in a lot of bands before he went on with his solo career. So, the way I'm going to break this up is I'm going to cover basically anything he did with his bands in this video, and then next video is going to be more about his solo career. Because I kind of went down this rabbit hole of researching Dio, and I only thought like he was only in Rainbow and Black Sabbath. But it turns out he was in a lot of other bands before that I never knew about. So anyhow, here we go. I guess we'll start way back in the early beginnings. So, he got into music all the way back in 1957, believe it or not. And you're talking at a time when Elvis was first starting to take off, and even in a time when there was no Beatles yet. So, imagine that, you know? So then a few more years went along, and then they changed their name to Dio and the Prophets. And that went on a few more years into the early 60s. And then at that point, Ronnie Dio and the Prophets ended up calling themselves the Electric Elves, which then went to the band name Elves, and then it went to just Elf. And whenever they went to Elf, that's about whenever they started to really, he started to really, get into more of his rock sound. And then after Elf, then that's when he ended up with Rainbow, which I would say that's when his signature sound started showing up. And then of course after that, he ended up going to Black Sabbath. But yeah, we'll go through the discography here and everything. So, things started off where he was in a band called the Vegas Kings, and then shortly thereafter, the name of the band changed to Ronnie and the Rumblers. So, you're talking like right about 1958 at this point. And then they changed their name again to Ronnie and the Redcaps. And I did actually listen to like a small EP of the Redcaps. I was on YouTube like listening to like all this earlier stuff that he did, just to sort of get an idea of what he was like back then, before hard rock and metal really even took off. So as far as discographies go, it like in his earlier era there was only like one full album, and the rest of it was like all singles. But I did go on YouTube and listen to like some random stuff from the Redcaps and the Prophets, and you definitely have that like 60s doo-wop sound from back then, but nothing that sticks out. But he did have one album called Dio and the Dominoes, which I did listen to the entire of that album, and for what it wasn't too bad. But it's like, listen back to this stuff, it's like Dio sounds totally different. Like you can barely tell it's the same guy when you listen to this era of Dio and like the more like the heavier era like I'm used to. But we're talking more in detail about Elf, about Rainbow, and about Black Sabbath. We'll talk more about those 10 albums. It's 10 total albums within the 3 bands. So, fast forwarding, we go to Elf in 1972, which really, with that band name, it started all the way back in 67 with the Electric Elves. But they didn't start releasing full-length albums until 72 when they came out with a self-titled album, Elf. And here you have Hoochie Coochie Lady, First Avenue, Nevermore, I'm Coming Back for You, Sit Down Honey, Everything Will Be Alright, Dixie Lee Junction, Love Me Like a Woman, and Gambler Gambler. And then moving on, 1974. So here we have Carolina County Ball, LA 59, Ain't It All Amusing, Happy, Annie New Orleans, Rocking Chair, Rock and Roll Blues, Rainbow, and Do the Same Thing, and Blanchy. And it's kind of weird, like they had a song called Rainbow. It's kind of like they were predating themselves there. And then we move on to the last Elf album called Trying to Burn the Sun. Here you have Black Swampy Water, Prentice Wood, When She Smiles, Good Time Music, Liberty Road, Shotgun Boogie, Wonderworld, and Streetwalker. Now, this is my first time ever hearing these three albums, and you almost get a Bob Seger type of vibe with it, and maybe a little bit of a Bruce Springsteen vibe. It's almost what these albums sound like. Like it's not really heavy, not really like hardcore, nothing like that. It's more of a bluesy style rock. But yeah, it's good stuff. I like it. We'll get to the ratings later. I'll talk about that a little bit later in the video. But yeah, 1975, Trying to Burn the Sun. I feel like 1975 is a big transition year, and I'll tell you why. So, transitioning on, Dio then moves on to Rainbow, and what Rainbow is, it's a little project that Ritchie Blackmore from Deep Purple started, because Deep Purple was on like a long break, and they also released their last album at that time in 1975 as well. So then, Ritchie Blackmore, he forms Rainbow. Ronnie James Dio joins him as lead singer. And over there we get 3 albums as well. So, what do we get with Rainbow? So 1975 also brings Ritchie Blackmore's Rainbow, so basically the self-titled album in that little project. We start off with Man on the Silver Mountain, definitely a popular one, love it. Self-Portrait, Black Sheep of the Family, which is a Fat Mistress cover, never heard of them. Catch the Rainbow, Snake Charmer, The Temple of the King, If You Don't Like Rock and Roll, 16th Century Greensleeves, Still I'm Sad, which is a Yardbirds cover. And then we move on to the sophomore album, Rising, from 1976. So, here we get Tarrant Woman, Run with the Wolf, Starstruck, which is pretty good, Do You Close Your Eyes, Stargazer, which I really like, awesome song, and A Light in the Black. Only a 6-track album here, because their last 2 tracks are like 8 minutes long, taking up the entire second side of the record. But not bad at all. And then we move on to 1978's Long Live Rock and Roll. And this is where I think Dio really started getting a lot heavier. So here we have Long Live Rock and Roll, Lady of the Lake, LA Connection, Gates of Babylon, awesome song, Kill the King, another good one, The Shed, Subtle, Sensitive to Light, and we end it with Rainbow Eyes. And I don't have any of their albums on physical, however, I do have this compilation right here, this little greatest hits compilation. And this covers both the Dio era of Rainbow, along with like the next era after he left. So this basically covers pretty much like all of Rainbow, from like the mid-70s to the mid-80s. Alright, so now we're moving on to 1980. So Dio leaves Rainbow. Rainbow carries on with another lead singer up until like the reunion of Deep Purple in like 84. But anyhow, so 1980 Dio gets with Black Sabbath, and that's after Ozzy leaves, and Ozzy then goes on and with his solo career, and they do Blizzard of Oz. So that was the start of his very successful solo career. Meanwhile, Black Sabbath brings Dio in, and you get the album Heaven and Hell. And, yeah, very awesome album. Love it. I do have it on physical right here. So here we get Neon Nights, Children of the Sea, Lady Evil, Heaven and Hell, Wishing Well, Die Young, Walk Away, and Lonely Is the Word. And they definitely needed a refresh, for sure. Black Sabbath did. I actually like this Black Sabbath album better than the last Aussie-era Black Sabbath albums. That's what I'm trying to say. But yeah, a lot of bangers on here. Love it. So then we move on. The very next year, 1981, we get The Mob Rules. So here we get Turn Up the Night, Voodoo, The Sign of the Cross, E5150 instrumental, The Mob Rules, very good track, Country Girl, Slipping Away, Falling Out of the Edge of the World, and Over and Over. So then it was like 1983. Dio leaves Black Sabbath and moves on to his solo career, which we're going to talk more about in the next video. And meanwhile, Ian Gillan of Deep Purple replaces Dio at the mic for Black Sabbath for one album. So yeah, here we go, Deep Purple again. So then, many years go by, we get a Dio Black Sabbath reunion by right around 1992, and they release Dehumanizer. And so here we get Computer God, After All, TV Crimes, Letters from Earth, Masters of Insanity, Time Machine, Sins of the Father, Too Late, I, and Buried Alive. It's worth noting that Time Machine actually got some exposure on Wayne's World. So, yeah, very cool album. I liked it. Very fun album. So, that was not the only reunion that Dio had with Black Sabbath. So, fast forward to about 2007. He gets back together with Black Sabbath again. Tours as Heaven and Hell. So, we get this little album. It's a compilation album called The Dio Years. So, not really an original studio album, but worth mentioning. So, all it is a compilation of his best stuff from the first three albums, along with, like, a couple live tracks, and then they do 3 new tracks off of this, called The Devil Cried, Shadow of the Wind, and Ear in the Wall. All good tracks. I know Sirius had The Devil Cried in heavy rotation when it first came out. But yeah, really cool compilation if you're trying to get into the Dio version of Black Sabbath. So then, a couple of years after that, they changed the name of the band to Heaven and Hell, which, this is why I'm going to count this as a Sabbath album. But they changed the name of the band to Heaven and Hell, and they come out with the album The Devil You Know in 2009. And really cool cover art, too. So here in this track listing, you have Adam and Evil, you have Fear, the single Bible Black, Double the Pain, Rock and Roll Angel, The Turn of the Screw, Eating the Cannibals, Follow the Tears, Neverwhere, and Breaking into Heaven. And this one here, it might be one of those I need to listen to a little more. I really wasn't feeling it at first, but I didn't hate it either. So there we go. So that's pretty much all of Dio's Black Sabbath albums. Now we gotta rate these albums. And like I said, we're gonna talk about the solo career here in the next video. That's gonna be a whole nother video. But as far as the Elf era, here again, I gotta listen to them a little more. But I did like them. Like I said, I get sort of a bluesy Bob Seger vibe from them. So, I didn't hate any of them. I don't know how to rate them yet, so we'll leave it at that. So, moving on to the Rainbow era. That's 3 albums. We have Rainbow, Rising, and Long Live Rock and Roll. And my favorite, I would say, would be Long Live Rock and Roll, because that's where Dio really started getting a little bit heavier. Like, it sounded way more heavier. And then I would say my least favorite is probably Rising. But, again, don't hate any of them. And then moving on to, I'm going to call this part 2 of Black Sabbath for the All In series. So, 4 albums here if you include Heaven and Hell. So, Heaven and Hell the band, I should say, because that can get confusing. So, I would say my favorite of his Sabbath era would be definitely the album Heaven and Hell. My least favorite would have to be The Devil You Know by Heaven and Hell. Yeah, that sounds confusing, doesn't it? But yeah, that was my take on the first half of Ronnie James Dio's career. And definitely an interesting history for sure. Like, he was actually in the industry when Elvis was like in his infancy, and even before the Beatles were even a thing. I mean, that amazes me, you know? Like, most of the bands I listen to don't even go back that far. But, and you guys probably know about his unfortunate demise to cancer, that he lost his battle in, like, 2010. So literally, like, a year and a half after this last album came out, we lost him. So who knows, if he was still alive today, maybe there would have been more material. I don't know, but he was a guy that just kept doing his thing. So, yeah, so we'll continue on next time with part 2 of Ronnie James Dio. So we'll see you next time.